It is March 10th, 2017. Sitting with me again today is Donna Braquet, former director of the Pride Center. In part one of this interview, we discussed what the Pride Center looked like when it was functioning at its peak, the bureaucratic hurdles it had to overcome over the years. We concluded by talking about the events of winter 2015 with effectively the erasure of Pride Center posts regarding gender-neutral pronouns and similar events happening with posts coming from the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, the now infamous holiday inclusivity posts. So today we're going to talk about the subsequent events leading up to the closure of the Pride Center and how it's functioned since then. So thank you for joining us again today, Donna.
Great, thanks for having me.
So Donna, could you talk about what happened when you and the students returned to campus in January of 2016, following all of this ballyhoo over the gender-neutral pronouns, the holiday inclusivity posts? What happened when you guys got back?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember it quite clearly. When we got back to campus, everything had kind of died down. This was the beginning of January 2016, and there was almost like a sense of relief and calm. But of course, this was before the legislature had come back into session. In the meantime, at the beginning of January, I was called into a meeting with Margie Nichols, who was the Vice Chancellor for Communications, and Ricky Hall, the Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Inclusion. I was presented with a big stack of printouts of the Pride Center's Twitter feed. And on that big stack of printouts of our Twitter feed were things that were highlighted and circled of things that the General Counsel apparently seemed to think were questionable things to have posted. A lot of it was a little bit strange. Like, for instance, at that time, on our Twitter feed, I would always retweet things that were happening with the Pride Center or the Office for Diversity and Inclusion. And so, for instance, here is on December 8th, a tweet from Channel 8 that says, "Oversight of UT Diversity Office, website reassigned." And then just a few minutes after that, I had tweeted from the Pride Center's account, "UT pulls inclusive holiday post." And so that was one of the things that was highlighted and thought to be sort of inappropriate. But to me, I thought, and I asked Vice Chancellor Nichols at the time, I was like, well, this is just a fact. Are facts not allowed anymore? I never was really sort of given an answer, but it was more of, these are things that they would like you to sort of steer clear of. And given the fact that I didn't want to harm the center or cause any reason for them to take my social media away, which was definitely one of the things that they considered doing, I was like, okay, well, I will be sure to, and I asked like all these different scenarios, like, can I repost a news story that has happened if I don't comment on it? And so I kind of went through all these different scenarios of what exactly was okay and what wasn't. So following that, our social media became much more controlled, I would say, and much more censored. Not only was Vice Chancellor Hall's website then clamped down on, our social media was sort of clamped down on. And then in mid-January, the legislature came back into session, and we saw, even though they had taken down the post, the gender-neutral post, and even though they had done like an investigative hearing, even though they had taken down the holiday post, we thought like, well, we're doing everything right, we're doing everything that they ask, so we should be okay. Then came all these bills about defunding the Office for Diversity and Inclusion, or every diversity effort across the entire UT system, which was something like $8 million. And then it sort of, went back and forth in committees, and they sort of whittled it down to just the funding that was for the Office for Diversity and Inclusion. And then there were sort of all these amendments. Like, at first they were going to take that money and put it towards bumper stickers for police cars that said like, "In God We Trust." And so there were some other iterations of where the money was going to go. So there was all this going on, and so the people who were paying most attention were pretty frightened. And then there seems to be sort of this laissez-faire attitude on campus, and everybody I would talk to would tell me like, oh, they'll never do that. You don't have to worry, like, that's never going to happen, or they wouldn't be that stupid to do that. And I'm like, have you been paying attention to what's going on, right? No, I really think that we need to pay attention. And the students, who were in the coalition were pressing the administration, like, what is your plan? What are you going to do if this happens? And they were just continually told, oh, well, we don't know if that's going to actually happen, or we'll deal with that later. And so the students definitely had a sense of urgency and were doing their part to sort of raise the profile of how big of an issue this could be. I mean, up until the day of the final vote, two things happened. So the students were meeting with the administration, including former Chancellor Cheek now, and they said, this looks like it's passing. And Chancellor Cheek was like, well, that's not the information that I have. I don't know, was that willful ignorance? Was it just trying to play them off? Did he really not know what was happening? Or did he know exactly what was happening? I can't figure quite it out. And students were like, what if we did a big orange campaign for diversity and inclusion, and, we did a huge fundraiser and we could fundraise the money that we need to keep the office here? Administration just didn't seem too worried or bothered about it. There just didn't seem to be that sense of urgency. This $500,000 office is about to be cut. And again, up until the day that it was voted on, people were coming into the center, and when we were sort of just a little bit frantic, and other people were like, oh, don't worry, you don't have anything to worry about. And so the bill, I guess when it came out, finally, it said to defund the Office of State Funds, that the university couldn't promote gender-neutral pronouns, and also they couldn't support Sex Week. There were multiple groups. I know that the Faculty Senate put forth a petition, and the students did, with hundreds of signatures. I mean, there was even a website, Stand with Ricky Hall, and sort of protests in support of Ricky and things like that. So that would lead me to believe that that office, although it was relatively new, meant a lot to people. So it passed. We were waiting for a few weeks to see if the governor would veto it or not. I guess I should go back to and say that in the spring, at the end of the fall semester, I wrote a letter to the chancellor and President DiPietro inviting them to come and talk with the students at the Pride Center. We had set that up in the spring. So several people came to that meeting: Vice Chancellor Hall, Vice Chancellor Nichols, Provost Susan Martin, Vice Chancellor Curley, and then Chancellor Cheek. And the students kept coming around to, why did you take down the gender-neutral pronoun post? What was wrong with it? Why did you do that? And after several awkward minutes of silence from all of them, Chancellor Cheek looked at his watch and said, I have another meeting I need to go to. And so that was, to the students and to me, it was sort of very telling that certainly they had several months to sort of think of what response you would give to students as to why. And so in one sense, I think that maybe they feared saying something in support of the pronoun post, in fear that that would get back to the legislature and they would be seen as being supportive. After that meeting, it's almost like it was a turning point for a lot of us. At the end of April is when all the laws get passed, and then the governor has until the middle or end of May to either veto it, sign it. So here we are at the end of the semester, it goes through, it's defunded. All along, Vice Chancellor Hall was like, you all are going, the units that were underneath him, he was like, you all are going to be okay. Y'all will report to someone else, but you all will be okay. It's just my office. Because there was nothing spelled out in the law about the Pride Center or Office for Multicultural Student Life or Equity and Diversity. All of us were assuming that it was his office proper. Optimistically, I was hoping the center's been here for 6 years. Isn't it going to be odd to get rid of it at this point? And then another part of me was like, this would be the perfect way to get rid of it. Any communication from administration, there was a complete vacuum. I mean, Vice Chancellor Hall was shut out way before this, so no information was coming to him. He had asked the administration, I have several things that have already been sort of promised in place. Are these going to be carried forward? And he was told yes. So, it was leaked or something that Vice Chancellor Hall was looking for another job, which who wouldn't, right? If you know that your office is going to be defunded. But it was almost made to seem scandalous in a way that how dare he be trying to leave. And of course, like the other folks that were in his office were trying to find other jobs, regardless of what the newspapers might say. Like they were given no assistance in trying to find other positions here on campus. So it was the 19th of May when Vice Chancellor Hall, had gotten another position and had told the administration, I'm going to resign. And, he told us just a few minutes before he announced that to them. And then lo and behold, on the next day, I get called in by my dean to come to a meeting with the vice provost for faculty affairs at the time. And I asked my dean, can you just tell me over the phone, like, what is this? And so my dean was like, what kind of pertains to the part of your job at the Pride Center? And I was like, can you just tell me over the phone, like, what's going on? And he was like, no, we really need to meet with you in person. And again, since the Pride Center was nowhere mentioned in the law, I guess it was a little bit of a surprise. When I met with them, they were like, well, effective immediately, you're no longer the director of the Pride Center. And the Pride Center is no longer an office on campus. And I said, well, the bill doesn't say anything about the Pride Center. And so then they said, Vice Chancellor Hall's office funded this center. And I said, well, what happens to all the other offices that were under him? And they said, well, that funding comes from a different place. That was never under him. And I said, so he was in charge of departments that their budgets weren't under him? And they were like, correct. And so, at that point is where, and so they said, well, the Pride Center is no longer an office, you're no longer the director. And so I said, well, does this mean multicultural student life is also being shut down? And that's when they said, like, that money was never under him. The Pride Center were the only office that was ever under him. And so I had lots of questions, as you might imagine.
Yeah.
And the answer was, that this is the way that General Counsel is interpreting this law. Because, to me, again, there seemed to be no mandate. If they wanted to defund the center, certainly they could have put that in there. Looking back, perhaps if they had put that in there, that might have caused more people alarm, and more people on campus would have seen that, maybe would have riled them up a little bit more. And again, I don't know if it was always assumed all along. What was the motive or the purpose of it? Was it to get rid of ODI in the Pride Center was just a casualty, or was it to get rid of the Pride Center and ODI was a mechanism to do that? I can't quite figure out exactly what maybe the primary purpose was. Going back again from maybe where we started, I don't know if I mentioned in 2011, even before Vice Chancellor Hall was hired, when the legislature got notice that they were going to hire for diversity, they tried to pass a bill saying that no campus in Tennessee could have a chief diversity office. That never really went anywhere, but you can look it up, it's still there. And so to me, they never wanted this office to exist. They never wanted ODI to exist ever. I don't know if they were waiting for something to give them cause to then dismantle it. The pronoun post was the perfect sort of entree into that. That was the middle of May. All the students are gone. Faculty are gone by then. It was a few days after commencement. There weren't many people to sort of rally around what had happened. They said the Pride Center is going to be run by students. They had not brought in Vice Chancellor Hall or myself or anybody who had any knowledge of the Pride Center. So they said, the Pride Center is going to be run by students. It'll still be there, but it won't be an official office, and it won't have any staff. So it'll basically be a space that students can go. That really is not a center. That if you're looking at a place that supports students and has resources and services and things like that, that was not going to be what was going to be happening there. It was basically just all but shutting it down. So during the meeting with Zomchik, he said, the student group Vol Out, which is a social group, will run the center. And I said, well, there's a student group, the Pride Ambassadors, who are ambassadors for the center. They know it. It's a leadership program. What if they ran it? And so he was like, yeah, whoever, it doesn't matter. And they were very quick to tell me that as a faculty member, I could advise the students, or, I could do certain things as a faculty member that I couldn't do as a director of the center, because the center didn't exist anymore, so it can't have a director. And so I said, okay, well, went back and, talked with the students and was like, hey, what if I'm the faculty advisor to the Pride Ambassadors? How about we try to carry on and run the center until next year, and hopefully funding can be restored. And you basically are handing over a professional operation to undergraduate students and saying, like, here, you do it now, right? First of all, they were a little bit distraught, the fact that something that meant so much to them was basically just discarded. At the same time, they were resilient in the fact that, like, okay, now we're sort of responsible for this. We had some plans. We set up a crowdsourcing site where eventually students raised like $11,000, which is a lot of money to raise through crowdsourcing, but it's not nearly enough money to pay salaries or to run an ongoing office. I mean, it seemed like a lot of money to us because our annual programming budget for the center was only $4,000. So in a couple of months, the students had almost made 3 years worth of programming budget that UT allowed us to have.
Well, since then, with these means, what sort of programs have you guys been able to continue putting on?
The summer was a lot of meetings. It was very interesting in that, the Faculty Senate kind of got involved. They started a diversity task force and then a Pride Center working group, so you had that. There was another faculty group called Tennessee Diversity Now. Then this interesting thing happened in June. Well, a really sad thing happened in June was the Orlando massacre. The students put together a vigil, sort of a healing space program that week after. Chancellor Shee came, Vice Chancellor Nichols came, several other administrators came. And I think that they were really impacted by, how the students were talking about how this awful, historically significant, largest mass shooting happened, towards LGBT folks. And yet, at the same time, their center had just been shut down and they didn't have a place to sort of support them. A month had gone by. There was absolutely no response from administration at all about what was going to happen with the Pride Center. Just that it was no longer an office. The space was there. After this healing vigil, I was told by Vice Chancellor Nichols, he's going to do something. He's going to take care of it, meaning Chancellor Shee. And I was like, okay, I'm waiting, right? There's a lot going on, and then it was announced that Pride Center was going to be now under student life, and it was going to have an administrative liaison that was going to be assigned to do things like timesheets and stuff for the student workers, and that the Pride Center's, not the student ambassadors, crowdsource funding, but there was about $10,000 in our account that I like to use as sort of reserve money. But there was about $10,000 that I'd been saving there for about 6 years. And so that money was going to be used then to pay this administrative liaison 10% of his time, and then also pay portions of the student workers to keep the center open. In this month, it went from being it's run by students, then somehow it shifted to being under student life. And in all of those meetings, I was never consulted or asked. I got the picture pretty loud and clear that whatever the future of the Pride Center was going to be, people did not want it to involve me. If it was that the law defunded ODI, and by way of that, the Pride Center, that's not my fault, right? So, why wouldn't you bring in the person who started the Pride Center and who has, worked there every single day for the past 6 years and knows all the students? I mean, really, when you think about it, me and Vice Chancellor Hall and the other employees, we were treated as if we had embezzled money or we were some type of horrible employees, when really we were just the victims of some really outrageous legislation. The people who were our colleagues one day, the people who were so friendly one day, I mean, literally the next day, I saw people and they walked past me without acknowledging me. I don't know, I'm not sure what transpired, but it was almost like we were toxic, we were poison, and no one wanted to have anything to do with us. That was pretty hurtful, the fact that I'm the one who created the space, and then I was just sort of cast aside from it. And so, once student life got involved, and they didn't ask me, and in fact, even told some of the students, you can pick a different faculty director. Not necessarily telling them to distance themselves from me, but letting it be known that, maybe that would be a wise thing to do. it just became like pretty clear to me that if the center was going to move forward, they didn't want it to move forward with me and my vision and things that I was doing before. I thought about it for like over the summer, and I really wanted to be there for the students and help them sort of get ready to take on what they were going to have to do to sort of run the center. They had sort of been rejected and cast aside by a lot of people, and I didn't want to just up and leave them. But as the summer progressed along and as it became more and more evident that student life was working on some type of plan that none of us were sort of involved in, I told the students, you should probably find another faculty director to work with you, because it's not healthy for me, it's not healthy for the future of the center, it's not going to be healthy for you all as Pride ambassadors to sort of be weighted down by whatever people had seen as being negative about my legacy. And so I resigned, and they found another faculty advisor, and they've been, doing some programming and doing things as best they can. But I know that it's taken a toll on them, and I know that it's been a long, long year. That's how I sort of exited the situation, and it's been I would say, I would be lying if I said it wasn't hard. I've kind of kept my distance all these months, try to let the center and the students be what it's going to be, and try and find, whatever my new path is going to be.
You didn't come to the University of Tennessee with the intention to open a Pride Center here. You came to work for the library,
right?
But you recognized the need.
I've tried to figure out what that is going to be. I was really, really enjoying directing the center just because it allowed me to work with students so closely and be a role model and be able to sort of see them as they progress through their college career. It's been really hard sort of losing that interaction with students. Sort of going back into like my original profession of librarianship, some of the ideas is to start an oral history archive of LGBTQ folks in East Tennessee, because nothing like that exists. And in a way, it's sort of going all the way back to how everything started with me here at UT, is that all of this started with doing interviews and a research project. And so in a way, it's kind of like all the way back to the beginning. And so I think that will be really interesting and rewarding in a different way than working at the center. But yeah, I'm just always looking for like how I can match my skills and interests with, moving something forward. My hope is that, the new chancellor says that she won't be on a campus that isn't welcoming and safe for all students. And so my hope is that, even though this has been a really rough couple of years, that the center will live on and it'll have the funding and staffing that it always should have had. I don't need to be a part of that. I was never hired to come here and do that. I just saw a void again and filled it the best I could for those years, always in hopes that it would then turn into something bigger and greater.
Is there anything about the story that you would especially want people in the future down the road to remember?
So I think in sort of, reflecting, and then also in the time that we're living through with this new administration, I don't want people to forget, or I want people to know that all of this started with a Breitbart post. Now, that would not make sense to most people a few months ago, but hopefully people still now know or remember what Breitbart is. It's a news agency that's run by Steve Bannon, who's now intimately involved in the White House. His site is often tied to white nationalists and other xenophobic and homophobic fake news, or at very least misrepresented news. And so I have to feel like, after reflecting on all of this and sort of trying to put all the pieces together, it might make me seem like a conspiracy theorist, but really, I don't know that any of this just happened, by accident. Hopefully you all have access to the original pronoun post, a very mundane, in my eyes, non-controversial 412-word post. gets picked up by Breitbart News and Fox News and gets turned into the fact that we're mandating that everyone use gender-neutral pronouns. And so I think maybe back then, the idea of alternative facts, the idea that things can be taken out of context and be spun into being something that it really wasn't. So that's one thing I would want folks to sort of pay attention to is, what was the motivation in this sort of exploding to begin with? And then the second thing I think that I guess we need to figure out, we'll find out in a few months what happens, is this Office for Intellectual Diversity, and the idea that some of the legislators brought up that since Trump has come into office, they've gotten concerns from students who feel uncomfortable in classes and on campus because when they express their favor for Trump or their conservative views, people counter that.
So the Trump students would like a safe space.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
that's what the Office for Intellectual Diversity would do. And so they said that they've heard from 6 students. And so I suppose 6 students' concerns is worth transferring $450,000 from ODI to basically a Center for Conservatism. I guess the overarching theme here to remember is that, when folks in a few years look back and try and see, when did government take over academia? When did they have power and control in the life of state universities? This is the example. Sex Week is the example, ODI is the example, Pride Center is the example. They have a playbook. This is what they're doing all over the country. And so I think that universities are going to look a lot different than they have historically in the near future, just because of the political influence that we're supposed to be shielded from. All of these things are just part of that larger power grab over sort of really the last, what some people might say, liberal institution.
Thank you very much, Donna, for your
Thank you.
very moving interview.